exchange. There'll be a number of presentations. We'll have an interactive session around policy, regulation and governance to support e-bus adoption. And yeah, so unmute yourself, share comments and questions, put up your hand if that's what you would like to do, or you're also welcome to add questions or comments to the chat. So today's City Learning agenda, so maybe just a bit of background. As part of the TUMI E-Bus Mission Africa Network, we'll be hosting 2 City Learning exchanges. One is happening now, and the next one will be happening on the 6th of October. And today's session specifically focuses on the policy landscape and unpacks a little bit of what kind of policy regulation and governance structures is required to support the adoption of e-buses. And the second learning exchange will focus more on finance, business models, and procurement. So for today's agenda, we'll give a very, very brief overview of sort of the planning landscape and policy landscape for e-buses. We'll then delve into presentations. So we have 3 cities. We'll have 10-minute presentations from 3 cities who will share their experiences of how they started the process, what kind of policies they've put in place, and just, you know, some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. We'll hear from Nairobi, who we are joined by Engineer Michael Njonge, who is the Acting Director of Projects and Programs, as well as Ms. Winnie Cho, who's a civil engineer and the principal officer for the network development in the public transport operations. And they're both joining us from NMATA, the Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. We're also joined by the city of Kigali, specifically Francois Zirikani, and he is really the go-to person at the city of Kigali on anything related to electric mobility, and acts as the e-mobility specialist for the city. And we've also got some presentations from Mumbai, India. And we're joined by Mr. Chandrakant Birajdar, who is advisor for best undertakings, and they provide urban transport operations for Mumbai, as well as Mr. Sri Wakodi, who's joining us from the organization called Maharashtra State Road Transport Corporation, and they provide intercity transport services. And they will provide, so these speakers will provide us with some experiences in their process of e-bus adoption. We'll then go into an interactive session where all of you will provide inputs in terms of policy recommendations, what has worked for you, what hasn't worked, where are the gaps, and this will really form the basis of a policy recommendations document that we will develop post the session. We'll then have 10 minutes to just go through the feedback form and then close the session. So before we delve into the presentations, just thinking around why we're talking about e-buses. As we are aware, the transport sector accounts for a large portion of greenhouse gas emissions and is a huge contributor to climate change. And transport is also a growing contributes to air noise pollution, which is really a growing challenge in cities across the world, and something we really need to focus on as we develop our cities. We have also found in cities around the world, but also from our exchanges with many of our cities in our network in Africa, that public buses are still diesel fueled, and they do contribute heavily to air pollutants that are coming from our public transport systems. And so as part of global commitments, many countries around the world have committed to transitioning to sustainable mobility, as well as electrifying their transport fleets, and have found as part of this decarbonization strategy that e-bus adoption is really is one good solution in a basket of sustainable mobility strategies that can be integrated and support the decarbonization of the transport sector. And as African cities develop their transport systems, they really have an opportunity to, at the same time, adopt these low carbon options, such as the electrification of their public transport, rather than lock themselves in carbon intensive technologies. So there are a number of benefits that you can sort of read from the slide, from mitigating climate change to reducing air pollution and improving air quality in our cities, support sort of this trend towards a modal shift in our cities. It can also support equitable development in our cities by improving access and efficiency as well as reliability, but also has the potential to stimulate local markets and economies. And as we have seen, I mean, a number of cities are on this path of e-bus adoption, and as this process grows, we are projected to reach market readiness. And analysis have shown that the total cost of ownership is cheaper in the long run compared to other fuels, bus fleets. So there are a number of benefits, and I think the more that we implement e-buses, the more we'll also know of more benefits and learn from our cities. So the current e-bus trends in the global south, so really South America and India are taking the lead in terms of, and they're really at the forefront of transitioning their bus fleet. So there's lots of lessons to learn from them in terms of policies that they've implemented, business models that they've come up with, and really how they've responded to it. In Africa, there is a growing move. South Africa, there's been a number of e-buses, Egypt as well. I think they're also in the process of wanting to roll out around 100 e-buses in Cairo. And then Morocco is also one of the key cities that have been rolled out e-buses. So this really is a growing, and I think, you know, with this we have an opportunity to learn from others and implement in our cities as well. So as we move in this direction, it will require quite a bit of planning. It is a new technology. It is a new environment, I think, that many of our cities are moving into. And so as this figure suggests, the policy landscape, as well as having these initial studies, is really imperative to get the process started. So analyses, feasibility analyses to really understand the cost benefits, other alternative co-benefits, technological that is most appropriate for our cities, who the stakeholders are, what the challenges are, and how we sort of progress. And once this initial phase is kicked off, you know, heading towards pilot projects, understanding the costing and the financing, and learning from these processes as well. And in the process, support mass e-bus adoption. And so when it comes to policy considerations, it's important to understand the e-bus ecosystem and really understand through understanding which policies are applicable, being able to unpack which are hindering uptake as well as which are there to support uptake. And so there are a number of different policy instruments that need to be considered. And this slide really indicates the different sort of components to e-buses, from the planning and really having the initial feasibility studies, who are the stakeholders, what is the stakeholder landscape, to other supporting strategies and policies around sustainable mobility. So thinking through traffic reduction policies in your city, other kinds of zero emissions planning around emission-free zones, specific dedicated lanes, vehicle emission standards is also a really important consideration. Commitments to global agendas, coupling it with environmental and health legislations and programs, sustainable urban mobility plans, as well as having it run side by side with electrification and renewable energy agendas as well. Financing, what kind of, we're thinking through incentives to enable the uptake of electric vehicles. Funding models, we need, innovative funding models, innovative business models, and sort of move away a little bit from the traditional structures. Looking at operation and maintenance around procurement, taxes on electric buses, and also just incentives to upskill and train, which I think is really an important aspect as well as we move towards a new technology. And then another big thing is charging infrastructure, understanding the land available, and land and having land use planning go hand in hand with e-bus adoption. Understanding the electricity grid and how we can integrate renewable energy into this planning. And another big component is around e-waste management. A number of our cities and countries, don't necessarily have e-waste policies as yet. And so this is really something to consider as well in terms of the electronic waste that comes from e-buses and from batteries, and thinking around the circularity of these components as well. And so also to consider that the developing an enabling environment really is an iterative process. So starting from an initial review of policies and what could change, but also knowing that once pilot projects come in, once buses have been put to really be able to review what has been done and what policies need to be put in place as a next step. So it really is an iterative process. From our engagements with many of you, from our needs assessments that we've done with you, there are these very important policy barriers and challenges that need to be addressed. From having these initial SUMPs, sustainable urban mobility plans, to feasibility analysis, support of national and local policies. We are still working in a very siloed fashion, which really hinders coordination, and it's really an important aspect of e-bus integration. Political will is still a challenge. Working with traditional business models and financial mechanisms is still a challenge. So yeah, there's a number of challenges that we have identified that I think needs to be addressed, but can also through this program and through learning from other cities can potentially support how we develop, how we address some of these barriers. So before we go into the presentations, just to leave you with, these two questions: how can national policies support these shifts, and what policies are required at a local level, as well as how can local governments advocate for these policies and advocate for integrating e-buses in their city. And I'm hoping that the presentations will unpack some of this, as well as our interactive session will touch on some of this. So yeah. So I think we can get started on the presentations now. As I've mentioned, we are joined by 3 cities. Each city has around 10 minutes each to give a presentation. And then after the presentation, we'll have a session, about a 15-minute session for questions and answers. But please feel free to already put questions in the chat as the speakers go along. I am going to hand over to Francois, who will kick us off with the presentations.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me share my presentation. So can you see my presentation?
Yes, it's clear.
All right. So I try to be very quick. So the state of Kigali, as the other cities in this network, we are trying to improve our air quality by introducing the promotion of electric mobility. So, and the bus is included. So the city of Kigali is just a small city, possibly compared to other neighboring countries. So the city of Kigali is the capital of Rwanda, with elevation of 1,767 meters, with an area of 730 kilometers square, and the population 1.3. So it has the other attractions like the famous gorilla and the other national parks. So once you come to Kigali, you will be able to tour. So now, why do we have to care? Why do we have to care for the air quality? Why do we have to care for anything else that we are bothered to introduce electric mobility actually? So in fact, when you see the emissions from the vehicles, they can cause strokes. As you can see, there's examples. They can cause the heart attack and the mortality. The air quality, the poor air quality can cause the respiratory disease. And in addition to that, we have seen that nowadays there are the reproductive issues in our bodies and organs. So all those are the issues that can really come from the polluted air that we are now breathing. Then, when it comes to reduction of emissions, scientifically, there are modes of transport that went to green. As you see this diagram, in fact, we should be making the walking should be the first one. We have the cycling, and then public transport. You see those are in the green. So the other ones, they tend to be in the red. So that means we promote walking, cycling, public transport. That's why in this discussion, we see how far we are with public transport, but mainly on e-bus. Then the city of Kigali has did a number of initiatives to manage the air quality. Those initiatives include the bike share scheme. We now introduced the bike share scheme in the city of Kigali. So where people are now endorsing it and using it, it's in a way of reduction of emissions, but as well as an affordable mode of transport. So in addition to that, we have a car-free zone, car-free days, which are also contributing to our goal of green mobility. And last time we did even impact assessment of car-free zones, car-free days. It shows a very positive impact on the PM reductions as well as the CO. And as far as electric mobility is concerned, we are encouraging the gender inclusive electric mobility, especially motorcycle and motor taxi. So we have a number of them. So as I said, as the ranking from the walking, cycling, and the public transport, we have a more organized public transport, but we are using a normal roads. So once we introduce the dedicated bus lane, that later will be translated into BRT. Now, in addition to those initiatives, we have other initiatives for reduction of emissions. We are now on a Euro 4 standards, and we have a legal framework to fine those who are emitting above the limits, emission limits, acceptable limits. So as well as we are moving towards setting up a 5-year-old maximum for imported vehicles. So in addition to that, we are in a framework of introduction of carbon tax in order to reduce the people using dirty sources of energy. And finally, and more importantly, we are in our journey towards penetration of electric mobility. Now, as we said, we don't have age limits now for importation, but vehicle in circulation they have to do inspections, and during inspections, they have to be tested for emissions. Why do we have to introduce e-mobility in the state of Kigali? So, of course, as the traffic is increasing, of course, we are depending on the fuel. So that means we have an imbalanced supply. In addition to that, the air pollution is really hazardous to health. We have the noise pollution, and of course, emissions of greenhouse gases that exceed climate change and have impact on both flooding and the other consequences. So, one of the solutions we adopted is to put all our effort to introduce electric mobility. With higher benefit, the efficiency, the cheaper to run, the lower emissions and noise, of course, reduction of dependence on the fuel, but of course we have overproduction of electricity. So once you have a more vehicle consuming electricity, we will increase the consumption. And of course, as emissions can even come from energy production, but it is easier to control rather than controlling the emissions from the pipes of vehicles. Now, the government agenda. So the president himself pronounced that it's really high time to introduce and accelerate electric mobility. That's the only government agenda. And we have some targets. We have incentives. Last year we improved some incentives, which are really very interesting to accelerate electric mobility. These incentives are also applied to e-buses. So once you are importing an e-bus, you don't pay any tax, or any other vehicle which is electric, you don't pay any tax. And then, in addition to that, you can get a free land for the government to put your charging station. So not only for motor vehicles, but also all accessories, even charging. So if you're importing any part related to electric mobility, you don't pay tax. In addition, that's what I was explaining, that you can get a free hand for the government. If you are doing a business, you don't pay license fee when you are running electric buses or electric vehicles. So those are some incentives. In addition to that, we have administrative ones, in addition to physical incentives. So I said the enforcement of standards. This is a Euro 4. We are soon introducing the restricted zones for green mobility, and the other, including the age limit. So another thing, for here, when you are bringing investment, you need to, in a certain amount of investment to get a tax holiday for corporate income tax. But for electric mobility, whatever the scale of investment, once you have an investment in electric mobility, you automatically get the tax holiday. Now, what's the commitment? We have a national transport policy and strategy approved last year. It has a really good component of electric mobility, and you have a paper on incentives, the one I was presenting. And as the city, we're also in a final stage of producing our strategy for the state of Kigali with these targets. Then, in addition to that, the city leadership, we have a technical committee on electric mobility, which is shared by City of Kigali, and includes public institutions, private, and NGOs. So in addition to that, we are in partnership with the European Commission, which is supporting some of the demonstration projects, including retrofitting and the other initiatives. So, after introduction of incentives, we have a significant increase in electric mobility, especially in vehicles and motor vehicles, which now we have around the 712 motorcycle, 228 motor vehicles, and with 163 charging stations in this like 1 year since we introduced incentives. Now, what is our journey to e-bus? The main challenge has been that e-bus is costly, but that's when you consider the capital cost. So for the state of Kigali, we conducted an assessment by the consideration of the total cost of ownership. So when you see the inputs as fixed cost, operational details, variable cost, When you put in the model, we have been able to get the total cost of ownership per kilometer. And when you see this, there's the graphs. The first on the graph on the left, you will see that if there is no incentive, if you introduce incentives, this one on the left, that means we have no incentive. With no incentives, the total cost of ownership should be equivalent after 6 years. But after introduction of incentives, after 3 years, it seems that the battery electric vehicles will keep being more beneficial than internal combustion engine bus. So, in any comparison, you will see that except the investment for other parameters, the battery electric vehicles are really very good compared to the internal combustion vehicles. In addition, in a consideration of operational costs as well as emissions. Now, how do we move forward after seeing that it is really possible and beneficial to introduce e-bus? In order to make people not fear the e-bus, the state of Kigali is planning to introduce a pilot project, and we are in further discussion for the World Bank to bring at least 20 e-buses by next year. And this year we do a design for the pilot. In addition to this, we are also in discussion of operators, manufacturers, and some other organizations that are triple GGI and electric mobility. So that's where we are in e-bus and in e-mobility in general. So we can work with anybody if anybody is interested. You should join us in this journey towards the e-buses. So thank you very much without taking much time. And I think I will need to leave the area. If there is any burning question, I'll be able to answer it before possible. I will sign out. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Francois. So as Francois mentioned, he has to leave after his presentation. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Yes, I see Nikki's hand is up. Go for it. Please, you're welcome to unmute, ask a question, put on your camera. Go for it.
Hi. Yes, just wanted to say thank you so much. Really enjoyed the presentation. And if it's okay, I might be in direct contact a bit later regarding some other questions. But just regarding one, on slide 25, I think it was, there was reference to some incentives. And there was a slide, there was an image where there was reference to incentives that were put in place with regards to ICEs versus electric buses, and I just missed it. But if the speaker's already left, then I can maybe catch up later. But I just missed that part, what the actual incentives were, because that would be really relevant and of interest to our future programs as well. I think it was yes, 25. I see it on the left there. Yes, that one. Because incentives are so important.
Yeah, in fact, when we say incentive, we find it, we took the incentive in terms of tax waiver. So when you take the portion of a tax in general, that's VAT, the customs duty, importation duty, all the taxes, when you convert them into money, that's what we put on this graph on the right. So when you reduce that portion, you will see the change. This one on the left, that means without exemption of taxes, and then this is right, that means after you reduce the taxes.
I see. Thank you so much. Would you mind if I contacted you directly at some stage?
No problem. No problem.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Nikki. Do we have any other sort of questions from the audience?
Yes, Jahan, there's a question from Laura in the chat. It says, what is the current status of discussions in Kigali with potential funders? You mentioned the World Bank. Are you experiencing any particular challenges to get funding?
So far with the World Bank, we are very fine because I think we are getting the first batch of money to do the design for the pilot. Design means how many charging stations we need, what is the capacity, what are the buses we need, what are the specifications, how do we manage them. So once we are done for this fiscal year next year, we should procure now at least a 20 e-buses for pilot. So far, there is no challenge so far for the World Bank. And we think once we have a pilot running very good, we should scale up working with our partners in the private sector.
Thank you. We also have Imran. Imran, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks so much, Francois. That was a really impressive presentation. I wanted to just confirm, you said that following your tax incentives, you guys have 163 charging stations and over 700 e-bikes and over 200 e-motor vehicles. Over what time period was that? Did you manage to have accomplish all of it?
In fact, it's like now a year and two, because we approved the incentives last year in April. So that's why people started, like, because before the cost was really high, the cost of the electric motor vehicles, because even the capital cost plus the tax were really high. So it's like 1 year and 2 months after introducing the incentives. That's where we have seen the increase in the fleet.
Thank you. So you're saying that since April 2021, you managed to accomplish all of that following the incentives?
Yeah. Since you approved our incentive, the cabinet approved those incentives last year in April. Those incentives.
Wow, thanks. I'd also like to make contact with you following the meeting if that's okay. And then I'm just curious, how does your government afford that? Or yeah.
Anyways, we can chat, but our incentives are published. Anybody can access the document incentives, but in any ways we can still be in contact.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I think maybe one last question. I am interested to know sort of what are some of the challenges you faced in terms of implementing some of these policies and incentives. And I'm also keen to know how you've gone about coordinating stakeholders and sort of creating an enabling governance structure around e-bus adoption or e-mobility adoption in general.
In fact, the stakeholders were really scattered, and in order to bring their voice in one place, we put everybody on a board. So that means at the city, we just formulate this technical meeting. That means you have private operators, you have government institutions, and you have NGO international organization. That means if you have any question or need any clarification challenge, it can be discussed and you get solution in one place. So that's it. I think that it has not been that difficult to bring people on board because we always work in groups here. And then when it comes to implementation of incentives, I don't think we have that challenges because everybody, our customs and our revenue authority are informed. We even informed the East African community. We already informed them that we are bringing incentives so that they don't really question why we are reducing the incentive. We are reducing taxes for our people. So far, what has been the trend was just people to fear on e-bus because the capital seems to be really high. So that's why we want to chip in and see if we can at least do a demonstration and then give the people a rate. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Francois. I see Nikki and Imran, your hands are still up. Do you have another question, or is that just
sorry, getting used to tea.
Okay, no worries.
Sorry, me too.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. If there's no other questions at this stage, I mean, you're always welcome to post in the chat as we go along. But I think we will go to our next presentation. Engineer Michael. I'm not quite sure who would be presenting, whether it's Michael Njonge or Miss Winnie Cho, but I will give the floor to you. You're welcome to share your screen and start the presentation.
Thank you very much. Winnie, you have the presentation?
Yes, I'll share it. Kindly just confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, it's clear. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Winnie. That's a presentation on a journey to e-mobility. That's the outline. And I'll move very fast because I try to stick to the 10 minutes. The objectives of the TUMI project, of which Nairobi City has become the TUMI project, which we have become a part, is clear: support Nairobi in transition towards electric bus deployment and a practical roadmap to sustain the deployment of e-buses. Next slide. First, the government had to create a supporting environment, and we started with our constitution in 2010 that has placed emphasis on sustainable development and protection of the environment. In 2016, Parliament passed the Climate Change Act that gave guidance for low carbon and carbon resilient development. We've seen at the local level, Nairobi City County has passed an act that allows the executive committee to designate areas. In 2019, we had the Finance Act, which reduced the excise duty for fully electric vehicles from 20% to 10%. And in 2019 also, we got the Energy Act that promotes renewable energy. And this has allowed the development of off-grid for areas that are not covered by the grid infrastructure that is both expensive to construct and slow to expand. There are what are called off-grid technologies being run by private developers. 6 of them run 192 mini-grid sites, and some of these have also been experimenting with e-mobility with 2 or 3 wheelers. Next slide. That is the environment that we've covered. The National Climate Change Action Plan that came out of the Act of 2016, Green Economy Strategy 2016 to 2030. And they all mention introduction of bus rapid transit, especially within the Nairobi metropolitan area. Recently, the government updated the nationally determined contributions, seeking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 32% by 2030. Also mentioned introduction of BRT system within and light rail within the Greater Nairobi area. And also the Kenya National Energy Efficiency Conservation Strategy of 2021, where transport has been identified as a thematic area with supporting objectives. Next slide. Earlier this month, towards supporting transition to e-mobility, the public electricity utility company floated an expression of interest for firms willing to roll out charging, to help roll out charging infrastructure. Utility company would roll them out and they will help now in helping to make them functional. How to charge, how to collect the money. Experienced operators of charging infrastructure are invited now to tender for this expression of interest. Because this has been one of the biggest challenges to roll out of e-mobility, the cost of charging infrastructure, where private interests have introduced them in upmarket areas and have been charging people who have electric vehicles and motorcycles. Next slide. "30 years ago, we had a drought in our country and we were heavily reliant on hydro energy generation. And it was at that point that the government, to overcome the drought, introduced thermal generation and also started developing geothermal energy production, which now has grown to almost 50% of the energy production in our country. In this slide, we see about 90% of our energy production is renewable. This figure I just checked has gone up to 92%, so we are on course to achieve the target of 100% renewable energy production in the country by 2030. This will help us reduce our dependency on thermal energy and can also now help our transition to e-mobility. Next slide. The journey that we've walked from the 1970s, the top left corner, we had organized bus transport in the country with double-decker buses in Nairobi. Then slowly we went down and we found ourselves at the left bottom corner.
Michael,
Can you hear me?
Your connection is a little bit bad.
Can you hear me?
You're going in and out. I can hear you now, though. The connection is a bit
Now
shaky.
you can hear me.
But I can hear you, yes. Go for it.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So now we've the transport with the commuter rail and the BRT, which is under implementation at the bottom right photograph. So next slide.
We just lost the presentation.
Next slide, please.
I think Winnie dropped off.
Winnie, can you? I think she must have suffered. We are using the same connection in the office, and she must have suffered also. Same loss of connection. But you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Wow. Let me see whether I can get a minute, please, if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll give them a minute or so just to try to represent again.
If there are any questions or comments for Michael in the meantime, feel free to pose them now while we wait.
Very sorry about that.
No problem.
Technology has a. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you able to share your screen and the presentation again?
Winnie is trying to get it back. She's the one who was sharing the presentation.
Michael, in the meantime, we've got a question for you from Imran.
Yes.
Imran, you're actually welcome to unmute and ask it.
Okay, sure. Hi, Michael. I was just interested to know, over what period, how long and how many megawatts, hour or megawatt peak energy did you guys take to get this geothermal 50%? Like, what's the period and what's the size?
Well, thank you, Imran. At the bottom of that, yeah, let's go to the slide on. At the bottom of that slide, you can see that the current generation capacity is 2,984 megawatts, while the peak demand, the highest demand we've had so far is 2,036 megawatts. Those are now the figures from the Ministry of Energy. So it's clear we are generating more power than we can consume at the moment. And in addition to this, we have connected to our neighboring countries, Uganda, Ethiopia to the north, who have massive generation of hydropower. And we are also connecting to Tanzania in the south, also to import more electric power, because moving forward, if we are going to use electricity for mobility and also for economic growth, industrial growth, we will need a lot of energy. And so in as much as we have more capacity than we have demand, we know that going into the future, we will need even more and are connecting to other sources. Is your question answered, Imran?
Thank you. Not completely, but very well. Thanks, man. I just wanted to know.
Yes.
I remember you said following the drought, you invested in
Yes.
geothermal. I was just wondering, like, how much and how quickly was that investment? Was it like over 20 years or 10 years?
It was over a period of about 20 years, progressively. Investigations had been done earlier, but it had never been exploited or developed for commercial exploitation. So we always knew that capacity, that potential was there, but as a result of that drought, the government went full out to develop the geothermal. And over a period of 20 years, it has exceeded even the hydro production. And we can see it being the main source of our electric power going into the future.
Thanks very much, Michael. Very interesting.
Next slide. Next slide. I think we've covered that. This now is the vehicle that the government is using to improve public transport. because in 2009 there was the Integrated National Transport Policy, which identified the need for Metropolitan Area Transport Authority for the Nairobi region, and this was executed in 2017 when NAMATA was formed, the Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. And in 2019, NAMATA gazetted 5 BRT corridors for development and 7 commuter rail lines to serve Nairobi and the other 4 counties that form the Nairobi metropolitan area. Next slide. These are the 5 BRT lines that have been gazetted, named after the big 5 animals in our national parks. Line 1, Ndovu, the elephant. Line 2, Simba, the lion. Line 3, Chui, the leopard. Line 4, Kifaru, the rhino. And line 5, Nyati, the buffalo. Currently, we have line 2, where we are having the pilot project, over 28 kilometers long. It's currently under implementation, as you saw in the photographs. Line 3, Chui, which is, we've just finished the detailed design, and we are going through the resettlement action plan activities to start construction within the next 12 months. Line 5, Nyati, we are working on the detailed design, construction to start next year. By 2026, we should have operations. Next phase, next slide, sorry.
Winnie, are you still with us?
Yes,
Really?
I'm here.
Next slide, please.
From my end, it seems it's showing. Let me stop sharing once again. Apologies. Engineer, can you see the screen?
Can see WC.
Sorry, Winnie, we can't see your presentation yet.
What about now?
No.
No, still not. I'm not quite sure how many slides you still have remaining. Perhaps you could just talk us through it if the slide sharing is working.
I think what I'll do is to go to the developments on our pilot line 2. Earlier this year, we, for purposes now of operationalizing the BRT line 2 pilot, we advertised for supply of 100 electric buses and biodiesel buses. And we are done with the procurement, and we are expecting to have operation on the first phase, the 12 kilometers, by the end of this year. We've gone for a lease type of contract, leasing of buses, with the gross cost contract type of operational lease. To date, on e-mobility, we have a private company in the city, Basigo, which has partnered with a Chinese manufacturer, BYD, of e-buses, and is piloting with 2 buses for one of the public transport operators in Nairobi. We also have a Swedish-Kenyan technology company, a startup that has been producing 2- and 3-wheeler battery electric vehicles, and is now producing battery electric buses. We have taxis that are electric, like Nopia Ride, that are operating in the city. And We have areas where we need to improve. In as much as we've developed standards for electric vehicles in the country by the Kenya National Bureau of Standards, we still need to finalize on some of the e-mobility policy documents by the government, and also standardize on charging infrastructure. The role of the electric utility company has not been defined until earlier this month, when now it became clear that they are working to set up charging infrastructure in the city and around the country to help in the transition. But issues of tariff design and incentives by the government, data privacy need to be, on the supply side, need to be addressed. And on the demand side, we need to look at payment methods, the charging stations and their standards, how to handle consumer complaints, and also financial incentives by the government to help in the rollout of e-mobility. I think I'd like to end the presentation there now that it's not showing. Sorry about that. And
thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate that really comprehensive overview. I am going to go to our next presentation, just cognizant that we are moving along quite quickly with our time. So I'm gonna, and while we with the next presentation, you please do post more questions, and we will have a bit of time after the presentations just to answer some of the questions. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our next presenter, who will share some learnings from Mumbai. Mr. Chandrakant Birajdar. He's an advisor at Best Undertakings, and he will just take us through the FAME 1 and FAME 2 program that was launched in India, a little bit about what it was about, and also how they've incorporated e-buses in their operations. What are some of the experiences and the challenges and the lessons learned from their side? I'm going to share your presentation, Mr. Birajdar.
Yes.
Great. Let me do that. While I share, please do post questions and any kind of comments or anything. In the meantime, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Awesome. You may go for it. And just let me know when to switch slides.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Chandrakant Birajdar, working as advisor in BST, Brun Mumbai Electric Supply and Transport, Mumbai City. We are providing electric supply in the Mumbai City, and also we are providing public transport in the Mumbai City since last 150 years. Next slide. Presently, we are operating nearly about 396 electric buses in Mumbai City, the biggest electric fleet in India. First, we have started procuring electric buses, 6 buses on outright purchase basis. Our municipal corporation has given fund for that. We have started it in 2017. After that, 40 buses were procured under FAME 1 and 340 buses under FAME 2. And besides this, we have already placed order for 2,100 single-decker AC electric buses and 900 double-decker AC electric buses. delivery of single decker buses is already started. We have received 10 electric buses, and in case of double decker, we have launching of electric buses is already started. It was done in the last week, and we are expecting delivery of next week, next month. We are also procuring 3,000 electric buses for premium service in Mumbai city. Besides that, we are planning to procure 2,500 more number of electric buses in the second phase. Next slide. I want to share our experience with the FAME scheme. It is basically a national mission for electric mobility was started by Government of India in 2011. Subsequent to this national mission, if FAME 1 scheme was launched in 2015. FAME means faster adoption and manufacturing of electric buses. Under this FAME scheme, incentives were given to three-wheeler, four-wheeler, and buses for creating demand of these electric buses in the India. In the FAME 1, million plus cities were allowed to participate or allowed to make the applications. Per city, 105 crore per city was allocated. Fund was allocated. That was including buses, two-wheeler, and three-wheeler, four-wheeler, and even charging stations, subsidy for charging station also. Department of Heavy Industries was the licensing authority or implementing agency for this scheme. Under FAME scheme, it was 60% of the subsidy, 15% of the cost of the vehicle will be given to the purchaser, subject to 15% of the, if the localization is 15%, maximum 1 crore subsidy was available, which was revised to 85 lakhs. And if this localization is 35% or more than that, then 60% of the vehicle cost or 1.5 crores subsidy was available. For charging station, 15 crores per city was allocated. Under the FAME scheme, 9 cities of the India were applied, and to each city, Government of India sanctioned to provide demand incentive or subsidy 40 buses to each city initially, and floated the tender. What was happened? The manufacturers had quoted different prices at different city for different cities, and what was observed that subsidy is calculated on the X factory price, but the manufacturer had quoted different rates at different. Then Department of Heavy Industries decided a one benchmark price for each model of the electric buses. They have fixed the lowest quoted in whichever city, that was taken as a benchmark price, and accordingly subsidy was given. In this FAME 1 scheme, FAME 1 scheme, 60% of the cost is borne by government, is by way of giving subsidy. But in most of the cities, buses are procured under GCC model. The buses are owned by the operator, but government or STUs have given subsidy. That then ownership issue was came in. Then it was decided to joint ownership of the vehicle. in the proportion of the subsidy and the cost borne by the operator. In this case, 60% ownership of that electric vehicle will be with S2s and 40% ownership with operator. In the next phase 2, this joint ownership was removed, and we have asked bank guarantee. Whatever amount of subsidy we are giving to them, we are obtaining bank guarantee from the operator to ensure that whatever we have given subsidy, the operator should not run away after availing the subsidy. That's why we have kept the bank guarantee. Obtain the bank guarantee amount equal to the subsidy given to operator. Under this scheme, we have purchased 40, as I already told, 40 buses. Next slide one. In phase 2, after receiving the good response for the FAME scheme phase 1, Government of India decided to extend it for other cities also, and they started a phase 2. Before that, they hold a meeting with stakeholders, STUs, and a vehicle manufacturer and operator. And this phase 2 was launched in 2019. In phase 1, GCC model was gross cost model was not compulsory, but even people, some cities have procured outright purchase also, but mandatory. And subsidy amount was reduced from 60% to 40%. Initial in phase 1 it was 60%, but it was reduced to 40%. And even in this case, to avoid the different rates for the cities, what they have done, they have calculated the incentive amount based on the NPV, net present values. In the case of gross costs, the rate per kilometer operators are quoting rate per kilometer. Based on that, 50% of the cost will be treated as a vehicle cost. Based on that, we find out the cost of the vehicle, assume the cost of vehicle, and based on that, we are Government of India is providing subsidy to the operator.
Sorry, Jahan's just lost connection. We will present now from our side.
Can I continue, madam?
Yes, you can continue. Go for it.
Okay,
We'll bring up the
okay.
presentation in a moment.
Okay. Under FAME scheme, phase 2, subsidy for 7,000 buses was made applicable, and 10 lakh two-wheelers, 5 lakh three-wheelers, and 35,000 four-wheelers. It was made applicable to Tier 2 cities, special category states, and even union territories were also allowed to participate, allowed to make application under this scheme. Maximum demand incentive under this phase 2, FAME 2, 55 lakh for single decker, 45 lakh for 9 meter, that is midi buses, and 35 lakh for mini buses. For this manufacturing of the electric vehicle in India was mandatory. Even in this escrow account for assured payment of the monthly payment of operator, escrow account was made compulsory, mandatory. beside this one, Niti Aayog, a central agency, they have formulated one concessional agreement, model agreement for such type of procurement of electric buses. And earlier, what was happening? Different cities are framing different term and conditions and floating the tender, and there was no uniformity. That's why for this phase 2, one concessional agreement, model concessional agreement was prepared by Niti Aayog, and that was made compulsory. Each cities have to follow, make agreement according to this model concessional agreement. What they have done in this model concessional agreement, they have provided price variation formula, even termination payment, additional termination payment, interest on the delayed payment was made mandatory. Many cities have applied, and buses were procured by the many cities under this scheme. Next slide, madam.
Sorry, I'm just going to come in here quickly. You have about 3 minutes left, so could we
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go for it.
Just I want to share our experience with operation of this procurement of electric buses and operation of these electric buses. Initially, in 2017, we procured 6 electric buses outright purchase. At that time, no electric vehicles were, prior to that, electric vehicles are not available in the market. Even procurement of electric buses was new to us. Framing the term and conditions for this procurement was a very difficult one. We are also not sure about the performance of a vehicle. That's why initially we have decided to procure only 6 number of buses, and after getting the experience of these 6 buses, we have decided to further enhance our. Initially, we have faced a lot of problem for procurement. Once we have issued the electric buses, they have completed almost 5 years operation. They are giving excellent service. After that, we have, our next stage was procurement of 40 buses under FAME 1. In FAME 2, we have enhanced our requirement to 340 buses. Now we have placed order for 3,000 electric buses. By 2023, by next year, December 2023, our 50%, more than 58% of our vehicle will be electric buses, and by 2026, our 100% of our fleet will be electric buses, and our fleet will be around. Beside this, we have also decided to increase the fleet size for Bombay City. Presently, we are operating 3,700 buses, but by 2026, our fleet will be nearly about 10,000 electric buses. Just I want to give some information about the rates issued. Initial for 6 number of buses we have outright purchase, but in FAME 1 it was GCC model rate. We have procured midi buses. At that time we have got competitive rebate, but in FAME 2 there was a competition was very much, nearly about 4-5 bidders were participated, but the rates were in the range of 80 rupees per kilometer. It was nearly about 40% less than the operating cost of the diesel vehicle. But floated the tender for 2,100 electric buses. We have got the lowest rate per kilometer. It is nearly about 40% of the operating cost of our diesel buses. That's why we decided to entirely switch over 100% switch over to electric buses. For this GCC model, we are offering them well-developed depots. We are providing electricity. We are providing upstream infrastructure for setting up the charging station. We are providing other maintenance facility to the operator. And this GCC under GCC model, the maintenance of the vehicle, operation of the vehicle is with the operator. We are just providing conductor for collecting the fare, and we are paying per kilometer. The demand incentive under FAME and FAME 1 and FAME 2 help STUs to go for electric buses. Otherwise, capital cost is very high. Due to this subsidy, STUs have started procuring some initially some few number of buses, but now we are going in a mass scale, and many STUs are decided to switch over to electric buses. Besides that, electricity available for charging of these electric buses is also in a very cheap as compared with the industrial or other commercial tariff. The tariff available for electric vehicle is compared very cheap. That's how government is promoting electric buses. We are sure in 4 or 5 years, most of the state transport undertakings will switch over to electric. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very, very informative presentation. We just have one more speaker joining us from Mumbai. And I see there's some questions coming, which is great. So I'm going to hand over quickly to Mr. Shri Vakode from the Maharashtra State Road Transport Corporation. Mr. Vakode, I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to share some of your experiences on e-bus adoption from your operations.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the chance. Basically, Maharashtra State Road Transport Corporation is involved in a intercity operation, and this corporation is holding the total fleet of around 17,000 odd buses, and most of them are on the diesel and CNG. Basically, as Mr. Birazdar from the BST, he has given you the very good input about the implementation of the electric vehicles in the BST, and his experience about how he has implemented in a BST. But basically, Mumbai State that is BST and other Pune Municipal Transportations and all other state transport undertakings, they are basically intra-city operators. And being the intra-city operators, the range is the main problem. The range is the more advantageous for them, because if the vehicle operates in a single charging for 150 to 200 kilometers, then that is sufficient for the intra-city operation. But MSRTC's peculiar operation point of view, if you will see, our minimum vehicle utilization per day, that is a single vehicle which is operated in a single day, is for a minimum 350 kilometers. So we are looking for buses which will operate minimum 250 kilometers to 300 kilometers in a single range. And unfortunately, there are very few firms are there who are manufacturing such type of buses having a range capacity of around more than 250 kilometers. So that is the disadvantage we are having. If you will compare the number of buses, electric bus, number of total buses, passenger transports in the state transport undertakings, you will find that more than 1.5 lakh buses are there, or approximately around 2 lakh buses are there in if you will put all state transport undertakings together. out of which hardly 35 to 50,000, 40,000 buses are operated on intra-city routes, and majority of the buses are operated on intercity routes. So this is the constraint we are facing for this intercity operation as far as the electric vehicles are concerned. So, and number of manufacturers are very limited. Hardly BYD is there. Another is a Greencell is there. Hardly 1 or 2 manufacturers are there who can provide us the intercity operations. And another thing which we have experienced in the in implementation of this FAME 2, because totally MSRTC has finalized the tender with 150 buses, and we have introduced we are introducing total 150 buses on the intercity routes, and that also all the buses we are introducing under the FAME 2. That is the scheme which has been introduced by the Department of Heavy Industries, that is the Government of India. But the problem which we face in implementation of the FAME 2 policy is to make this proposal more bankable. More advantages are given to the operators instead of the authority. So in such cases where the termination is there, then authority will take over the complete operation and they will implement it, and more responsibility should be there on an operator. Instead of that, the more responsibility has been put on an authority. So there are certain terms and conditions in a FAME 2 which are totally in favor of operators and not in favor of the authority. So there is a need to look into these things. And another important thing is that we have faced is the advantages with the BST is having their own electricity generation is there, or electricity transmission is there. So for them, the availability of the electricity is not a problem. But for the MSRTC, we have to depend on the state electricity board. And when we depend on the state electricity board, it has been realized that at least for a single depot, if we go for the infrastructure development or to get the high tension lines to the depots, the cost which is involved is approximately around 4 to 5 crore. And if we will see the economics of the intercity operation and the intracity operation, then what I feel is intercity operation is more economical because the number of kilometers that you operate in a year is ranging from around 1.5 lakhs kilometers to around 2 lakhs kilometers in a year, compared with the 70,000 or 60,000 kilometers which are operated in a intracity. So the ROI is more in case of an intercity operation compared with the intracity operation. So more effort should be made. At present, the more focus in India is on an intracity, but I feel the more focus should be on an intercity so that the more reach will be there and electric vehicles will be more popular in India. And another thing that we expect from the Government of India is to get a more subsidy for this intercity operation. At present, Government of India is giving a 55 lakhs rupees as a subsidy for each bus, but that is not sufficient to make this project viable. There is a need to have a viability gap funding for these things, because even though the subsidy is there, the cost of the operation which the operators are quoting is approximately around 45 to 50 rupees per kilometer. And over and above that, if you add the overhead cost of the operations and the cost of the conductor who will collect the revenue, the total cost becomes around 55 to 60 rupees per kilometer. And the earning that we get from this public transport on the intercity routes and other things is not so high. There is always a gap between the earning per kilometer and the cost per kilometer. The cost per kilometer, initial cost is much higher in case of electric vehicles. No doubt the recurring cost is less. Operational cost may be less, but if you will consider the initial investment cost, which will convert it into the OPEX, that is the CAPEX which is getting converted into the OPEX due to the loan and heavy investment, initial investment. So that also doesn't fulfill the complete reimbursement of the cost which is involved in the operation of the electric buses. And that's why there is a need to look into the this viability gap funding also, so that this operation of the electric vehicle can become more viable. And these are the only points which I want to highlight about the shortcomings or the expectations from the FAME 2 policy which has been introduced introduced by the government of India. And there is a need to encourage more intercity operation, and no doubt they are encouraging the intracity operation, but there is also a need to encourage the intercity operation to make this product more popular in India. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our presenters. I'm going to go into questions and answers now. I think, Lauren, you had a few questions. Maybe if you would like to ask it, and then I will give it to Imran, who also had a few questions. While we wait for them, you're welcome to put your hand up if you have any additional questions and comments for our speakers.
Thanks, Jahan. Maybe I'll start with India, since this was the most recently presented. I was wondering, part of the frame speaks about local manufacturing and a percentage of the buses needed to, the parts or those sort of things needed to come from local industry. And what did the local manufacturing industry look like before FAME? And has FAME like improved the local manufacturing industry within India?
Would Mr. Vakode or yes?
I will answer this question. Before implementation of this FAME scheme, electric buses are not available, easily not available. Only one or two manufacturers were products they have launched, and that too with limited operating range. But as localization was made compulsory, initially manufacturers brought the components and assembled it. But as that localization was made compulsory, they have slowly switched over to more localization. Now more than 80% of the components are manufactured in India, and except battery, almost all the components are manufactured in some manufacturers. They are also manufacturing battery also, which has changed drastically. Initially, it was very low localization, but within 4 or 5 years, they have picked up a lot, and now almost in case of Tata and other cases, it is more than 80% also.
Okay.
No doubt the support from the government of India through the FAME 1 and FAME 2 scheme, it has given a boost to the industry of the electric vehicles. No doubt about that. And that's why the expectations are more from the government. That is the case. But what Mr. Birazar has said is correct. Except battery, nowadays, with the support of government of India, more localization, more parts are being manufactured in India itself, except the battery. And it has given a boost to the industry in the electric vehicles also.
Right. Imran, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Just a second. Yeah, I just wanted to know the percentages that you were giving regarding the fleet growth and availability. Was that best undertakings percentages, or was that
No,
Mumbai and India? Yeah,
yes,
that's just
carry on, sir, carry on.
No, I just wanted to know what percentages were those.
What I mentioned in my presentation, that percentage attending 50% of our vehicle by 23 and 100% by 2026. It is I am referring about fleet position of BST only, that in Mumbai city.
So
Not
50% by
entire India. I am just referring Mumbai city.
okay, so just Mumbai. Okay. No, I think that clears it up. Thanks.
No, but other metropolitan cities are gradually they are also picking up.
Mm. Okay. No worries. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I've actually got a question for Engineer Michael and Winnie. I mean, you shared quite a bit about your policy process and the different components and things, and it would be interesting to hear what you would suggest or recommend to other cities who are starting this process. What would you recommend? Where would you recommend they start, and policies to start looking at? Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Jehan is, I would say, very important for government at the policy level to set the tone. And like we showed in our presentation, when in 2016, firstly under the Constitution, issues environment, and then the 2016 Climate Change Act that started guiding the development agenda towards low carbon and climate resilient development. It set up a whole chain of developments, and the private sector was able to very quickly pick up on the opportunities. And surprising thing was already the private sector was ahead of government. They were running electric vehicles on the street before the government had laws in place and standards. So that is very important for the policy direction to be given by the government. I think that's what I would say.
So I had a follow-up question related to the private sector. I think you mentioned the Kenyan Swede company, and I think that's Optibus, if I'm correct. And I was wondering whether they were supplying buses like through a procurement process with the city, or whether they are, as you mentioned, running private bus services.
They started off as Optibus and have recently changed their name to Rome. And what they started doing was conversion of mainly land cruisers that are used in the national parks from internal combustion engines to electric, and then developing the charging infrastructure within the park for these vehicles. So the vehicles that became totally independent of fuel supplies they were using before. They would be charged by solar panels, and they would be used in the national parks, and they went completely green. They also went into manufacturing of 2- and 3-wheeler battery electric vehicles. It is with the shift in public transport now under Namata towards electric buses that the company has moved towards production of electric buses. And now we've seen them in some of the functions in discussions with the private sector, who are the operators of public transport in Nairobi, on rollout of electric buses. And they are giving very, very attractive proposals to the operators. So we expect them to see them playing a bigger and bigger part in that area as we move forward. answered your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Everybody. Good morning, everybody. My name is Engineer Osa from Lamata, Lagos. So it's interesting to hear what our counterparts in Kenya are doing. So well done, Kenya. But I just want to find out a few things about the whether this Kenya scheme has started itself, whether the buses are actually running, or if it's not, when it is proposed to run. I don't know if you can help us with that info. So if your buses are running right now, or if they are not, when are you proposing that they start running the electric buses?
Thank you, Musa, and we are done with the procurement process. As you know, in public procurement, procurement of something like buses runs over even 6 months, 3 to 6 months. So we started earlier this year. Now we are done with the procurement. A few approvals to be given. By the end of the year, we expect to have both the infrastructure for the first phase of line 2 ready and the first buses in the country, both electric and biodiesel, because we emphasized for initial fleet acquisition, fully built units.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything that you have as that you can share publicly on your electric bus agenda and development so far?
For example,
maybe things like your policy, your policy objective or policy documents, the route designs and stuff like that. You know, just anything, the concept that you can share.
Definitely. For the pilot, I think we have all the documents that have helped us in the decision making on this journey.
Okay, so it's okay maybe if I get your contact and then you can share those with us, or is that okay?
Feel free.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I just have actually one more question for you, Michael. You mentioned that you've just completed the procurement phase of this, and I'm wondering, you know, was there anything that needed to change about your procurement process or policies to enable, you know, this kind of procurement? Yeah.
When we started the journey it was before COVID, and then we were of the idea to procure buses and have an operator with a fleet owned by Namata. Then around comes COVID, and at the end of COVID, after having stopped all these things have changed quite a lot, and we had to change to also relook at our procurement model, and we went for the leasing model rather than outright procurement of the buses, and that was one of the major decisions that we had to make. That was a change from the original policy direction that we had. That answer your question?
Yes. Thanks so much. Are there any other questions at this stage from anyone?
I have a short question regarding the outsourcing of bus operations to the private partner. So basically you outsource it for the depreciation period of 10 years, and after the depreciation period over, so who is responsible to look after these buses? Private partner, or you give back to the government?
Is there anyone specific for your question, Shumaila?
Yeah, I'm asking basically from the presentation that was shared last by the advisor of transport in Maharashtra for the FAME one. Yeah.
Contract in case most of electric buses are procured under GCC model. The contract period is initially it was 10 in earlier tender it was 10 years. Now it is 12 years. After 12 years completion of the contract, operator has to take out these buses. The ownership will remain with the operator only.
Okay, I think you mentioned in your presentation that there is the 60 or 40% cost sharing between the government and private partner, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's valid for the cost of the buses as well?
But that 60% of the initial cost is borne by government in the form of subsidy. But that is recovered in the contract period, no, madam. It was initially in the tender itself. We are mentioning that the salvage value of the ownership of the vehicle after contract period will remain with the operator. Salvage value. Scrap value before quoting the rates initially, they have to consider the scrap value of the electric bus after 12 years, and they have to calculate the cost and quote their per kilometer rate.
Okay. So subsidy is basically on the per kilometer charge, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so I am going to move on to the next part of this. So initially, when we had planned our agenda, we had we were going to do an interactive session, and that went into quite a bit of detail around policy recommendations. I'm actually just going to share my screen again. However, we have completely run out of time, but the presentations were extremely useful and very insightful, and I think it was really valuable for everyone, and really appreciate everyone's questions. But I do want to take perhaps 5 minutes, since we haven't been able to really get to the session. I do want to take just 5 minutes and maybe have a bit of a round robin of inputs from cities and from participants around policy recommendations. And yeah, if you could perhaps share just take 1 minute to share sort of what you would recommend as a city to enhance the enabling policy environment. Are there specific policies that we need to think about? What are the gaps and opportunities? We don't have to answer all these questions, but I'm just putting them out there. What are the gaps and opportunities? And yeah, so those two things, just what kind of policies do we need to enable this environment? What would we recommend that we can document for cities? And what are the current gaps and opportunities in this regard? So I'm gonna call, I think I can't see actually any of the participants. So perhaps maybe Lauren, could you lead this and maybe call on some of our cities? I know that we had asked some of them to prepare a little bit of an input here.
Hi everyone. So I think it's important. I posted the 2 questions that we kind of were looking at, discussing in a little bit more detail. And I just want to note that the intention of this was really that, so in the beginning, Johan unpacked all of kind of the barriers and some of the ideas in terms of how to, what policy should address. And then we had these 3 detailed presentations about experiences. And the idea here is to kind of collate all this information into a somewhat like recommendations 2-pager that is an offering for cities, specifically in Africa, in how to move forward or how to take up e-bus adoption. So I know people are in different phases based on your city, and I also note that we just saw there's a 5-minute notification for the meeting to end, so I think it's going to cut us off. So I don't really want to, like, doing a round robin might cut us out of time here. So I would rather if you have anything to comment based on these two questions, it might be best to just drop it in the chat. Otherwise, we will send it as a follow-up email, mostly because we just want to show you kind of what the next steps for the network is as well. And we are basically running out of time, unfortunately.
Okay. That's totally fine. So please do drop your recommendations in the chat. We will send follow-up emails with the recording and the presentations. So just before we also move on, my colleague Caitlin has dropped the link to the feedback form in the chat. I would really appreciate it if you just take a minute or two just to complete this. It won't take very long. So while I go into the next steps, if you can just complete the form, that will be fantastic. So yeah, let's just go through the next steps. So in May, we had a meet and greet. We are currently busy compiling city profiles for our cities, for some of our cities. And we've had numerous engagements and interviews with the different representatives. So with that ease in process, and we're looking to launch these by the end of September. We've had our first learning exchange today, which was really fantastic and very insightful. And we're looking to host the second one on the 6th of October as an in-person session as part of the Sustainable Mobility and Climate Change Week in Dakar. There are also a number of trainings that are still ongoing as part of this program, and I think Lauren will also send a follow-up email on the different trainings that our partners are offering in the coming weeks that you are welcome to join. And then also just want to notify everyone that we are, ICLEI Africa, in partnership with a number of partners, are convening the African Mobility Month, which is coming up soon. But I will get into a little bit more detail on that in a bit. So yeah, just a little bit of an update on the exchange happening. So as I've mentioned, it's planned as an in-person workshop. We're looking to have it as a full day, and we're also looking to have it in Senegal, in Dakar. So I will notify you, or we'll send out follow-up emails and invitations in the coming days. So please do look out for that, and we will touch on a lot more on finance, business models, and partnerships for e-bus adoption. And then African Mobility Month, it's a campaign that's convened annually, and it's really a campaign to share knowledge, to share learnings and experience, and to inspire action. So we really would love our cities to get involved in this initiative and showcase some of the interesting projects and work that they're currently doing in African cities. We are, as part of this campaign, we are looking to have a bit of a section of it that's around hearing from our cities. It's called #HearingFromOurCities. For this, we invite our cities to share with us a 1 minute or so, 1.5 minute video answering a few questions about their city. So what are the sort of challenges that their cities are facing in terms of urban mobility, but also what are the examples that they can share of us about good practices happening in the city, interesting initiatives and projects that are currently undertaken. And we would love to share this as part of African Mobility Month. We have developed a very short brief on this video, so we will share that with you as well in the coming days. But yeah, we would love our cities to contribute to this campaign, and we would love to hear from our cities and to showcase our cities as well. So we really encourage you to get involved in this campaign as well. That's it from my side. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, for this interaction, for all the questions, to our presenters for the very informative presentations that they have provided with us, for us. And yeah, we will share everything, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next engagement as well. I think that's it for time, right? We've got a minute remaining. So thank you all. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.